The moment Ryan Bradford called my cybersecurity protocol outdated boomer tech in front of 500 people at the company all hands, I knew exactly how this was going to end. Him fired, me vindicated, and his precious demo crashing harder than a Windows 95 machine running modern software. Name's Harold Patterson, by the way. Hal to my friends. I'm 48, been writing code since this punk was in middle school, and I just watched my professional reputation get tossed in the corporate dumpster like yesterday's lunch. Ryan was video calling from our Dallas headquarters that Monday morning, that MBA-polished smirk plastered across his 32-year-old face like he'd just discovered electricity. His hair was too perfectly styled for someone supposedly running innovation, and his voice had that business school tone they all learn, buzzwords and zero substance. The kid had been at TechFlow Dynamics exactly 4 months and already thought he owned the place. He clicked to a slide titled Modernization Initiative for Legacy Teams and announced we'd be transitioning to full agile methodology starting immediately. No discussion, no input from the people who actually built the systems keeping this company afloat. Just corporate speak for, we're throwing out everything you old guys created. The conference room in our Chicago office went dead silent. I blinked slowly because for the past 18 months, my blockchain authentication system had prevented 2 major data breaches and saved TechFlow over $8 million in potential damages, all while working mostly from my home office in Naperville, debugging code in my robe and drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's Most Adequate Developer." But apparently results didn't matter anymore, only visibility. Then came the real knockout punch. All proprietary security protocols and authentication frameworks, Ryan said, advancing to another slide, need to be uploaded to our centralized code repository. Full documentation, technical specifications, commit histories. My team will be reviewing everything for potential patent consolidation. That's when I leaned back in my chair and felt my jaw clench hard enough to crack a walnut. This wasn't about modernization or collaboration. This was theft, plain and simple corporate intellectual property theft, with a PowerPoint presentation wrapped around it like a birthday bow on a turd. If you think that sounds paranoid, you've never watched a hotshot VP waltz in from a competitor with an MBA and a laptop full of stolen ideas. I unmuted myself, keeping my voice level. Can I get clarification on whether this applies to systems developed outside standard work hours? Ryan's shark smile got wider. Hal, if you're developing security solutions relevant to our technology roadmap, we consider it within company scope. Even if no company equipment, time, or resources were used, I asked. He actually laughed. God help me, the kid laughed like I just asked if gravity was optional. If you don't like the new direction, Hal, you're welcome to update your LinkedIn profile and find somewhere that appreciates legacy thinking. The video call went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Even Kevin Walsh, our junior developer who still uses Stack Overflow for basic syntax questions, stopped typing mid-keystroke. The marketing team pretended to study their phones. Diana from QA stared at her notebook like it contained the meaning of life. And me? I smiled back at that camera with the same expression I'd worn 22 years ago when my Navy commanding officer told me I'd never amount to anything in the civilian tech world. Thanks for the clarity, Ryan. Really helpful guidance. I closed my laptop with the satisfying click of a trap snapping shut, unplugged my second monitor, took a long, slow breath that smelled like betrayal and Colombian dark roast. Then I stood up, slid my laptop into my messenger bag, and walked toward the door like I was heading out for a sandwich. No shouting, no desk slamming, no dramatic speeches about respect or years of service. Just the quiet confidence of a man who'd been building toward this moment for longer than Ryan had been working anywhere. People stared as I headed to the elevator. Diana caught up with me in the hallway, her face pale and confused. Hal, what's happening? Where are you going? I looked at her, steady as concrete foundation. Stay, watch, learn how the game really works. The elevator doors opened with a gentle ding. I stepped inside, turned around, and watched Diana's worried face disappear as the doors closed. She was a good engineer, sharp and detail-oriented. She'd figure out soon enough what Ryan had just stepped into. I didn't slam any doors on my way out, didn't send a company-wide email or post anything dramatic on Slack. Just walked to my Subaru Outback in the parking garage, popped the trunk, and placed my messenger bag next to a pre-addressed FedEx envelope that had been sitting there for 3 weeks. The label read, Thomas Sterling, Escrito General Counsel, TechFlow Dynamics. Inside that envelope was 47 pages of documentation proving that the blockchain authentication system Ryan wanted to steal was mine. Not theoretically mine or morally mine. Legally, documentably, notarized by a licensed professional mine. See, I'd been building it on my own time for the past 18 months. Nights, weekends, my own hardware, my own electricity bill, with witnesses, with digital breadcrumbs so clear that a first-year law student could follow them straight to federal court. They thought I'd roll over like some grateful company man with hurt feelings and a half-finished resume. But I don't roll over easy. I plan quietly. And when corporate climbers try to steal what I've built, I don't argue or complain or write angry emails. I file lawsuits. The authentication protocol that would eventually destroy Ryan's career started as a napkin sketch at Murphy's Diner on Route 34, right next to a stack of blueberry pancakes and a waitress named Sue who kept my coffee topped off without asking. It wasn't elegant at first, just hash functions and verification loops scribbled in blue ink while I waited for my car to get new brake pads at the shop next door. But it was the moment I stopped being just another employee and started being something else entirely. A builder who was tired of watching good ideas get stolen by people who couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. That was 12 months before Ryan Bradford ever darkened TechFlow's doorway. 12 months before he'd start erasing my name from project documentation and pretending collaborative innovation meant stealing credit from guys who actually knew what they were doing. I hadn't started building it out of spite or revenge. I'd started because I could see the writing on the wall clearer than Ryan's perfectly styled hair. The company wanted flash over substance, buzzwords over actual security. My proposal for a zero-trust blockchain authentication system that adapted in real time to threat patterns? Too complex, they said, too hard for sales to explain to clients. So they shelved it, filed it under maybe someday, and moved on to shinier, simpler things that looked good in PowerPoint presentations. I didn't. I went home to my split-level house in Naperville, opened my personal MacBook Pro, different machine, different network, zero connection to TechFlow's infrastructure, and started coding. Function by function, protocol by protocol. I stitched together something that worked silently, efficiently, and most importantly, legally. Every Git commit had a timestamp. Every backup got uploaded to encrypted cloud storage I paid for with my own credit card. I even emailed weekly progress reports to my personal Gmail account using a variation of my name from my Navy days. Call it paranoia, but in this business, paranoia is just experience wearing steel-toed boots. And once a month, I met with my old Northwestern roommate, Professor James Hoffman, now teaching computer science and looking like he'd been wrestling with tenure committees for 20 years. We'd grab beers at O'Malley's pub and walk through my progress. He'd nod, ask smart questions, and sign off as an independent witness on development logs I kept notarized through a service downtown. "You really think they'll try to steal this?" Jim asked one October evening, reviewing my latest code samples while nursing a Guinness. "Jim, I've been in corporate tech for 22 years. They steal everything that isn't nailed down, and half the stuff that is." I sipped my beer. "This isn't speculation. This is insurance." He signed the witness forms anyway. Good friend, that Jim. 8 months into development, the authentication system wasn't theoretical anymore. It was a functioning framework that could handle enterprise-level security loads without breaking a sweat. I tested it against simulated attacks using publicly available penetration testing tools. The results were so solid they made TechFlow's existing security architecture look like a screen door on a submarine. That's when I scheduled a meeting with Thomas Sterling, a no-nonsense intellectual property attorney who used to handle defense contracts and looked like he'd gone 15 rounds with patent trolls before breakfast. His office smelled like old leather and new money, and his handshake could crack walnuts. I laid out everything on his mahogany conference table: development logs spanning 12 months, backup archives with metadata intact, witness statements from Jim, off-site build evidence showing I'd never used company resources. Even a screen recording of me coding a core module with date/time watermarks and WGN radio playing in the background, because paranoia and documentation go together like peanut butter and jelly. Tom didn't even blink as he reviewed the materials, just flipped through pages with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every corporate IP scam in the book. "These are yours," he said finally, closing the folder. "No question. Clean development trail, independent witnesses, zero corporate entanglement, textbook case." He drafted 3 separate provisional patent applications that week: the authentication engine itself, the threat adaptive protocols that made it smart, and something I called ghost verification, a background process so elegant it could catch infiltration attempts that traditional firewalls would miss completely. Filed under my name, my personal name, with language so airtight it could survive a Supreme Court challenge. Tom triple-checked every clause, making sure there were no loopholes some corporate lawyer could exploit later. "Standard filing fee is $1,600 for all 3, he said, sliding the papers across his desk. "Plus my hourly rate for the paperwork. Call it $4,000 total." I wrote the check without hesitating. Best money I ever spent. I didn't tell anyone at work about the patents. Why would I? It wasn't their business. The system was mine, built with my ideas, my time, my resources. TechFlow had already made their position clear when they shelved my original proposal. Then Ryan arrived 4 months ago like a fox in a corporate henhouse, thinking speed and MBA jargon made him untouchable. He announced in his second week that TechFlow would soon launch a revolutionary cybersecurity platform, and I nearly choked on my sandwich. The way he described it, the features he mentioned, the architecture he outlined, it was my system. Not inspired by my work or similar to my approach, it was my actual code, dressed up with corporate buzzwords and a marketing budget. And what Ryan didn't know, what nobody in that glass tower of recycled business theories knew, was that the moment they tried to commercialize my authentication protocols, they'd step on a legal landmine with my name engraved on the side. Because every core function in that system, every security algorithm, every verification sequence that made it bulletproof was now protected by federal patent law. Not because I was vindictive or planning some elaborate revenge scheme, but because I'd lived through enough corporate backstabbing to know that silence only protects the thief. So I'd stopped being silent. I'd become methodical. And methodical preparation cuts deeper than anger ever could. The trap was set. Ryan just had to be arrogant enough to walk into it. They called Ryan's stolen project Guardian, which made me want to gag like someone force-feeding me corporate buzzword soup. Like slapping a superhero name on plagiarized code could magically transform theft into innovation. Ryan stood up at the next all-hands meeting with his trademark breathless enthusiasm and declared, "We'll be unveiling Guardian at the Midwest Security Summit in 6 weeks. This is our game changer." Game changer. Right. I watched the recording later. Someone had forwarded it to me with the caption, "Guess who thinks he invented cybersecurity?" Guardian was supposed to be revolutionary. A next-generation security platform that would predict attacks before they happened, self-heal compromised systems, and adapt to new threats automatically. Basically, everything I'd been building for the past 18 months, only now duct-taped together by a team that didn't understand which parts I'd intentionally left undocumented. Because here's the thing about real innovation that they don't teach you in MBA programs. Not everything lives in code repositories. Sometimes the most crucial pieces live in your head, in handwritten notes on legal pads, or in 5-line Python scripts you never commit to version control, because you know exactly how they'll be stolen if you do. Ryan didn't understand that. His team started scrambling like ants whose hill just got kicked. Late nights became the norm. Slack channels lit up with frantic messages at 2 a.m. Desperate requests for system credentials that nobody could locate because I had them memorized, not saved in any password manager they could access. Kevin Walsh, bless his optimistic heart, flagged something concerning 2 weeks into their development sprint. In the main engineering channel, he posted, "This authentication module has Git history that predates Guardian by 8 months. Looks like it was forked from an external repository before our current development cycle even started." Radio silence for 20 minutes. Then Kevin followed up. "The commit signatures don't match anyone on our current team. Should I rebuild this from scratch to avoid any licensing issues?" Ryan's reply came 23 minutes later, terse and dismissive. "We're under deadline pressure. Focus on integration, not archaeology. Always deadlines over details with these MBA types." Kevin privately messaged a mutual friend later, asking if anyone had the original technical documentation. He said half the function calls weren't returning expected values, and some of the core security protocols were just empty shells. Placeholder functions waiting to be filled in. Except I hadn't left placeholders for anyone to fill. I'd removed the actual logic and replaced it with stub functions before I quit. Not maliciously, just as a basic precaution. Think of it like taking your house keys when you leave a job where your boss has already hinted he might repurpose your office space. Meanwhile, TechFlow's marketing machine kept churning out bright, shiny promotional materials. Guardian, bold, brilliant, bulletproof. They scheduled investor preview demos. PR drafted press releases about next-level disruption in enterprise security. Someone even ordered custom conference swag, branded USB drives, coffee mugs, and polo shirts with the Guardian logo. And underneath all that corporate theater, the codebase was hemorrhaging like a severed artery. Automated test suites were failing left and right. Security simulation environments crashed under even basic stress loads. They tried bringing in outside contractors, expensive consultants who charged $200 an hour, but nobody could reverse engineer my authentication logic without hitting dependency conflicts everywhere they turned. That's when the whispers started. Quiet at first, just nervous conversations in empty conference rooms and cryptic Slack DMs between engineers who were starting to connect the dots. Wasn't this part of Hal's personal research project? I thought he was still developing this independently when he left. Does anyone have his original design documents? Nobody said it publicly. Not yet. But doubt was spreading through the engineering team like a virus, and Ryan's perfect confidence was starting to develop hairline cracks. He kept smiling during status meetings, standing in front of whiteboards talking about synergistic convergence and AI-native security paradigms, like someone who'd memorized a TED Talk and mistook it for actual technical knowledge. He brushed off every concern with the same dismissive wave. This is how disruption feels. Messy, but magical. It didn't feel magical to the people trying to make his stolen code actually work. It felt like trying to rebuild a fighter jet using only the instruction manual and half the parts. But outside TechFlow's glass bubble, nobody knew about the internal chaos. The Midwest Security Summit organizers were promoting our upcoming demo like it was the second coming of internet security. Trade publications ran preview articles. Venture capitalists started sniffing around, asking pointed questions about our intellectual property portfolio and licensing agreements. Everyone wanted in on what they thought was going to be the next big breakthrough in cybersecurity. And the one person who could have told them the truth, that they were about to watch the most expensive tech demo failure in conference history, was sitting in his home office in Naperville, drinking coffee and waiting for the other shoe to drop. The real fireworks started exactly 8 weeks after I'd walked out of TechFlow's offices. A phone call to legal that nobody took seriously at first. Tom Sterling's paralegal forwarded it with a casual subject line. Patent inquiry, routine review requested. No alarms, no emergency meetings. Because in their corporate mindset, I was still just Hal from systems architecture. Reliable, quiet, non-threatening Hal who brought homemade cookies to team meetings and documented everything nobody else bothered to track. The cease and desist letter arrived the next morning like a guided missile with a legal warhead. It hit General Counsel's inbox at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, filed by Thomas Sterling with all the warmth of a surgical incision. Subject line: Immediate cessation required. Patent infringement notice, case number 824-07M. 6 pages, single-spaced, citing specific components of Guardian that directly violated provisional patents filed under my name 3 months earlier. Tom had even included annotated screenshots of their GitHub commits and timestamp comparisons with my notarized development logs. It wasn't a warning shot or a negotiating position. It was legal carpet bombing with precision targeting. By 10:30 a.m. that Tuesday, Ryan had been dragged into an emergency conference room with 2 corporate attorneys and someone from risk management who looked like she'd rather be auditing tax returns. I heard through the engineering grapevine that he actually laughed when they showed him the cease and desist letter. Laughed like someone had just told him the Easter Bunny was filing a trademark complaint. "He's bluffing," Ryan reportedly said, leaning back in his chair with that MBA confidence intact. Provisional patents are just paperwork placeholders. They don't mean anything until the full patents are approved. Bless his business school heart. Because about 2 hours later, the second letter arrived. This one came directly from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, confirming that 3 provisional patents filed under Harold J. Patterson had been formally accepted and logged 10 weeks prior. Patent interference protocols were now active under Title 35 of federal law. Any continued use, demonstration, or commercialization of the protected technologies would constitute willful infringement. That word, willful, mattered more than Ryan's entire vocabulary of buzzwords. In patent law, it's legal dynamite. It meant they couldn't claim ignorance anymore. It meant damages could triple if this went to court. General counsel's tone shifted from eye rolls to emergency meetings. Emails started flying like shrapnel from an exploded hard drive. The CTO's assistant accidentally CC'd half the development team on a message reading, "What exactly do you mean we can't demo our own platform?" followed immediately by a "please disregard this message" retraction that fooled nobody. One of the UX designers posted in a private Slack channel, "If HAL filed these patents before Guardian development even started, are we completely screwed?" Someone replied with a gif of the Hindenburg going down in flames. But the real panic hit when they traced Guardian's core architecture and realized it wasn't just inspired by my work or coincidentally similar to my approach. It was dependent on it. The authentication protocols, the threat detection algorithms, even the adaptive response mechanisms. They weren't parallel developments. They were identical copies. Because they were mine. There was no independent innovation, no clean room implementation. Guardian was my system with Ryan's name slapped on top like a vanity license plate on a stolen car. And now that car was about to explode in front of 500 industry professionals at the biggest cybersecurity conference in the Midwest. Ryan doubled down anyway. He stormed into an emergency engineering meeting and declared with the desperation of someone whose career was circling the drain, "This is a scare tactic. We're not pulling anything. The summit is in 4 days. We've got booth space booked, investors flying in from both coasts. He's not going to torpedo his own reputation over legal technicalities." Oh, Ryan, you still thought this was a game where reputation mattered more than federal law. The Midwest Security Summit smelled like overpriced coffee and corporate desperation when Ryan's team arrived at McCormick Place that Thursday morning. He showed up wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage and confidence that could have powered half of Chicago. His entourage, 4 engineers, 2 marketing coordinators, and 1 unfortunate intern named Ashley, followed him like he was leading a parade instead of walking into a legal ambush. They set up booth number 314 with branded banners, premium conference swag, and a demo workstation loaded with Guardian. Prime real estate, center floor, right across from 2 competitors who'd already posted teaser videos about their own revolutionary threat detection platforms. Same market Guardian was supposedly going to dominate. The cease and desist letters ignored, the patent confirmations dismissed. The legal warnings brushed aside because Ryan had convinced himself that provisional patents were just suggestions. Inside the TechFlow booth, tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. The demo laptop sat connected to dual 4K monitors. 2 senior engineers hovered nearby like nervous paramedics, running last-minute diagnostics and trying not to sweat through their branded polo shirts. Kevin looked like he hadn't slept since the patent letters arrived. They'd spent the past week frantically rewriting code, trying to avoid direct conflicts with my filings. But it was like trying to perform heart surgery with duct tape and optimism. "Everything ready for the live demo?" Ryan asked, his smile too wide, his voice pitched just high enough to betray his nerves. One of the contractors gave a thumbs up without making eye contact. The lights dimmed for the product showcase panel. The conference MC introduced Ryan as one of the most innovative minds in cybersecurity today, and I swear even the sound technician looked skeptical. Ryan walked to the podium, delivered his pitch with theatrical flair. Slick presentation full of buzzwords and vague promises about revolutionizing enterprise security. He gestured toward the massive screen with the confidence of someone who'd never actually tested his own product. "Now we'll demonstrate how Guardian is transforming cyber defense in real time." Scattered applause, spotlight focused on the demo screen. For about 30 seconds, it actually worked. The interface loaded cleanly. Simulated cyber attacks began launching. Numbers scrolled impressively. Threat indicators blinked with authority. The audience started murmuring appreciatively. Then my authentication system realized it was being used without permission. Screen froze mid-simulation. A bright red error message popped up. Authentication failure. Core security protocols not found. Kevin lunged for the laptop like it had just caught fire, fingers flying across the keyboard in panic mode. Too late. The entire demonstration collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Attack scenarios turned to zeros. The threat detection engine imploded. The backup systems tried to kick in and failed because there were no backup systems. There had never been backup systems because I'd removed them 6 months ago. One of the engineers muttered loud enough for 3 rows to hear. "Why are all the security verification modules empty?" Then, in a moment of beautiful honesty, a contractor from the overflow team stepped forward and said what nobody else dared. "We couldn't legally implement the original authentication protocols. They're flagged for active patent violations." Complete. Dead. Silence. On stage, Ryan stood frozen like a deer in headlights, gesturing helplessly at the crashed demo screen. The conference MC whispered into his earpiece, "We need to move to the next presenter." Ryan couldn't even respond. His perfect confidence had evaporated like morning fog, leaving only a 32-year-old MBA who'd just learned the difference between stealing ideas and actually building them. The audience clapped politely, the kind of sympathy applause you hear when someone forgets their lines in a high school play. 2 weeks later, I started at Nexus Systems in downtown Chicago, chief security architect, corner office overlooking the river. My own team of engineers who actually understood that experience beats arrogance every single time. The salary was 40% higher than TechFlow had ever paid me, plus equity options and a budget to build systems the right way from day one. Ryan? Last I heard, he was explaining his career transition period to recruiters and learning that collaborative innovation doesn't look quite as impressive on a resume when it comes with patent violation footnotes. 6 months later, I'm still at Nexus, still building bulletproof security systems, still getting headhunter calls from companies who learned the hard way that 22 years of experience can't be replaced with PowerPoint presentations and MBA confidence. Some lessons you learn in business school, others you learn by trying to steal from guys who've been writing code since before you discovered the internet. Thanks for the clarity, Ryan. Best career advice I ever got.